Alex said he would take the time. He thought the Success Manager Hub was pretty cool on Monday to talk about his experience with GoTo, some of the struggles he's had, and what he's working on, right?
Hi, everybody. Like Scott mentioned, we met like 5 years ago when I was a freshman at Villanova just looking for an internship because I went to like the real job fair on campus with like the big companies and they didn't want to take me. And then I went to like the startup fair, met Scott there. Back then, GoTo wasn't a thing. It was actually this digital marketing company. I've been around for a long time, and there are some advantages to that when you're working at a startup, but there's also a lot of like disadvantages. One disadvantage of being around a startup for a long time is that things change a lot. One thing that happens with that, especially at a company like GoTo where everybody's working remotely, is information is oftentimes like siloed. And when you're around a while, you kind of build up like a technical knowledge debt of like, hey, things used to be this way, and you kind of make an assumption that they were this way and they've changed over time. And one thing that I've struggled with is not taking ownership of getting that communicated or like asking the right questions or making assumptions. That is something that I'm working on in terms of taking ownership of making sure that I have the right understanding and not making assumptions as it goes along. Another part of being around a fast-growing startup for the formative years of your early adult life is that things are growing very quickly. Like back in the day, it was just me and Scott and a couple people on here like Sheila. It was a much different organization. As GoTo has leveled up, the people working at it has needed to level up. And that is something that has given me a decent amount of anxiety, to be honest. Like, how do I continue to grow in terms of like, as like a person in terms of the organization? And I think the way that I was thinking about it wrong was like, I was putting myself over the whole because I was worried about how I kind of fit into the whole. Where like, I was so anxious about, hey, GoTo is growing so quickly. How do I get better myself so that I can keep making value for this company that I care about? And I think that actually is not the right mindset to have, because once you start thinking about like, okay, how can I get better for myself instead of like putting the company ahead of you, then you kind of start making bad decisions or don't like really take ownership of certain things and start blaming others instead of taking accountability for yourself. So I think that's a second thing that I've been working on. This might be like just a personal thing, and then also just working in a very fluid organization is that, there's a lot of anxiety around work. I think this has always just been like a personal thing for me of like choking up in moments and never wanting to be like a kid that has to take like that 3-point shot, buzzer beater, because I know I'd fuck it up. And I think the reason why I would fuck it up is you just get like this feeling inside of just like being overwhelmed.
When you have those moments where it feels like you need to hit the shot, to take Alex's metaphor, well, an NBA 3-point shooter spends 2 hours shooting 3-pointers before every game. So when they get in that situation, it's just reflex. It's not that situation isn't more important, but you need to have habits, you need to have processes where whatever situation you're in, you have a framework that already exists for you that you can apply to that situation so the situation doesn't feel overwhelming. You already know how to get through it, which can be really tough. But that's why we talk about approach versus outcome. There's a direct correlation between shots taken and success. And so it's about just doing it and going for it. And when you bottleneck yourself and overthink it, you don't afford yourself the opportunity to miss. And so going for it, knowing what approach makes sense to you is so much more important than the outcome that's achieved.
And what that leads to is like this making like mountains out of like little molehills. Like I can think of like so many little projects that, Scott is like, hey, you got this. And then I'm like, okay, this is like my opportunity to like do this thing. Like I'm going to do it really well. Overthinking it, assigning too much value into like this one at bat because you're trying to like prove something to yourself or somebody else, and making that like just doesn't lead to negative outcomes. And like working here at GoTo, I've seen it happen with other people too. And you feel this pressure, but it's not put on you by anybody else. It's just put on you by yourself. And you're kind of your own worst enemy in that way, where you're assigning too much value to something that you then don't execute or perform. And then you default to like thinking about it instead of like doing it, because the doing gives you some level of like anxiety. That's kind of where I'm at. And it's been a journey, obviously, starting from, working here over the past 5 years and like learning and growing and trying to like figure stuff out. But I think at the end of the day, it's been positive overall. I am not been more excited about GoTo's future than the current moment that we're in. It really, for a while, it felt like we were kind of like wandering through the dark, trying to find the thing. And now it feels like we found the thing and looking to scale.